Last February, for the very first time, a non-English speaking movie was awarded Best Picture at the Oscars. That movie turns out to be Parasite, a South Korean movie. And it's great news. But this video is not a review of Parasite, so you can stay until the end because there's no spoilers here. This video is about analyzing how the South Korean movie managed to get the most prestigious award in cinema. Why is it important? And what can we expect in the future? So let's jump right into it. Hello, my name is Luis. Welcome. Let's bring some context here. South Korea is a country located in the South Korean peninsula. In the north, we've got North Korea. In the east, Japan. And on the west, we've got China. It's a country with a population of 55 million inhabitants in an area of 100,000 square kilometers. South Korea has a GDP of 2.4 trillion US dollars and a subsequent GDP per capita of 46,000 US dollars, both measured in parity of purchasing power. That places South Korea as a country with roughly the size of Guatemala, Portugal, and slightly bigger than Ireland, with a population similar to that one of Kenya, Spain, or Colombia, countries which have like 5 to 10 times the size, and an economic volume similar to that one of Turkey and Italy, and bigger than Spain and Canada. That is topped up with a Human Development Index of 0.91, which is very high and only surpassed by some of Europe's most developed countries, USA or Japan. The history of South Korea has been shaped by the existence of the old three kingdoms of the Korean peninsula, Manchurian influence, Japanese and Mongol attempts and actual invasions, links with the Chinese dynasties, and in most recent times, invasion by the Japanese in the first half of the 21st century, and the split of the nation in two, North and South after the Second World War, have led to very development paths from both North Korea and South Korea. Culturally, and allowing all the evils of simplification and generalization, South Korea can be placed in the larger context of the East Asian cultures. That is, those nations of East Asia and Southeast Asia historically influenced by the Chinese culture, both literary traditions and religions. Indeed, South Korea shares strong cultural ties with neighboring Japan, North Korea, and China. Okay, I know, trying to define cultural region can be extremely problematic and complex, but for the sake of our analysis, we'll have to agree on some generalization and commonly agreed terms by different experts in the fields. A lot of us are already quite familiar with the Japanese cultural staples such as Japanese anime, Japanese manga, Japanese food, and up to some extent the Japanese pop music. But the rise of the Korean culture in the last decades is almost unparalleled. Officially called Hallyu, is bringing South Korean culture closer and closer to us. Korean food is more popular than ever before. South Korean horror cinema has placed itself almost like a genre within a genre, with movies such as Train to Busan 1 and 2, The Host or The Witch being rated as some of the best horror films in the last decades. Other famous South Korean movies include Old Boy, The Handmaiden, The Chaser, or Memories of a Murder.
Oppan Gangnam Style.
Few years ago, it was PSY's Gangnam Style that got us dancing like crazy everywhere, on the streets, at home, on weddings. Now it's BTS smashing it almost everywhere they go. And Parasite winning Best Picture at the Oscars. How did we get here? Two key points. First of all, it didn't happen overnight. And second, it didn't happen by accident. Think about this. Just because something is not known to us here in the West, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen or it doesn't exist. Look, as early as the year 2002, at the time where J-pop, Japanese anime, and manga were at the peak of their international popularity, the South Korean singer BoA hit #1 in Japan, selling more than 1 million copies, in the country that was at the time the second biggest economy in the world. Earlier on, 2000 was a breakthrough year when the South Korean group HOT gave its first overseas performance in Beijing, China. In 2001, the movie My Sassy Girl, a comedy about an engineer student who doesn't have a very successful romantic life, was a massive hit in Asia, especially in Japan, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. And the DVD release, yes, DVD release was a big thing at the time. The DVD release created a massive cult following in Southeast Asia that resulted in numerous adaptations and remakes. At the time, in 2002, Korea was also promoting itself, of course organizing the World Cup together with neighboring Japan. During these last decades, South Korean dramas have been very popular in Asia, including massive markets such as China and Japan. And that leads us to the second point. The Korean wave, or Hallyu, has made Korean culture increase in popularity since the early 90s. But the fruits of this are directly linked to the deliberate effort from the Korean government to promote culture as an export. Just like they did with the big firms that we all know, Samsung, LG, Kia, Hyundai, and many others, promoting their products and giving them subsidies. Soon the Korean government realized that culture can also be exported as any other manufacturer, with the added advantage that most of the time it doesn't need to be transported and the majority of time is actually exempt for taxation. Koreans are excellent at targeting their products to the markets, and you can clearly see that in K-pop. If you have ever listened to a K-pop artist or K-pop group, you would quickly realize how they include catchy verses and catchy lines in English to make it more palatable for the international audience. And we might believe this is new, but no, it is not. Actually, back in the early 2000s, they were including lines and verses in Japanese at a time where Japan was a primary target market. And the movie Parasite is not strange to that, but it goes beyond, as a story that brings us is so relatable that anybody, either from the Western world or from a developing country, can easily relate to. We're talking about class and income differences and the opposite living condition that generates. The struggles of everyday life. That is what is depicted in the movie Parasite, just spiced with a little bit of satire and humor. In fact, what some call Hallyu 2.0, which includes, apart from K-pop, Korean animation and Korean gaming, emphasizes on generated content and usability and takes full advantage of platforms such as YouTube, Instagram and all social media to spread like fire. Adding to that, recently many blockbuster movies such as Avengers, Age of Ultron, The Bourne Legacy, The Black Panther or Star Trek Beyond has chosen South Korea as a set to shoot some of the most exciting scenes, increasing in that way the exposure of the country. The question is, why is all this important? Well, we're social creatures, right? My point here is that we are greatly influenced by our environment and what we see. What we are familiar with shapes what we do, what we become, and even our perception of ourselves and others. For a long time, the movie industry has been dominated by Hollywood, and that will take time to change. But in simple terms, Hollywood is the cinema industry of the United States of America. And let me highlight this. Cinema is a great entertainment, form of art, and a business. And as any other cultural artifact, it's got a great power of telling stories, and in this case, quite literally. And stories are told, obviously, from the perspective of the teller, from the perception, the narratives, the collective experiences, the structures, and the views of those who design, manufacture, and tell the story. And all those factors, however, become the familiarity of those who view the stories as well. This is getting too academic. Let's simplify. We all know how most Hollywood movies go. Tom has this issue, then this happens to him, then he fights those guys, then that one dies, and that one as well, and something happens. But at the end, Tom always manages to overcome everything and succeed. And Tom is a hero, and he is normally, most of the time, an individual. In contrast, in most Asian cultures, most of the emphasis is put in the collective rather than on the individual. Look, in a movie like Parasite, there's not a clear hero. There's not even clear who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And this is quite consistent with the ambiguity that sometimes surrounds and characterizes the relationship between individuals and groups in most Asian countries. There's no clear individual hero. Having a movie like Parasite from South Korea gives us hope, because in the future it might be a Chinese movie awarded Best Picture and elevated to the international arena. Then it might be an African movie, it might be a South American movie with a totally different story. Just to recap, a relatively small country from the Far East, after being amputated and divided by war, has managed to become an international cultural superpower and has delivered a movie like Parasite that brings us the opportunity for perhaps seeing in the future slightly different stories coming from different places, told by different people, with different faces, perhaps using different ways of telling stories. Perhaps that will help us understanding other people slightly bit more, perhaps see them or even ourselves with slightly different lenses. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for your time. Like the video, share it, and I will see you next time.